There are plants growing in your backyard right now, ones you have been pulling, spraying, and composting for years, that traditional herbalists, modern researchers, and natural medicine practitioners consider some of the most powerful healing plants on Earth. Not exotic imports, not expensive supplements. The ones you called weeds last Saturday and threw in the trash. 9 of them, growing freely in your yard right now. Each one with documented antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, or immune-supporting properties that have been used in folk medicine for centuries and are now being studied in university laboratories. Stay until plant number 8. It is the one that stops people completely when they find out what it does, and what they have been spraying with herbicide for years, thinking it was worthless. Drop your US state or USDA zone in the comments and tell me which of these you have growing right now. Let's go. Plant 1, Plantain, Plantago major / Plantago lanceolata. This is the one growing in every crack of your driveway, every compacted corner of your lawn, every neglected garden path, and it is one of the most well-documented antimicrobial and wound-healing plants in temperate horticulture. Plantain, broadleaf or narrowleaf, both equally medicinal, contains aucubin, allantoin, and actioside, compounds with documented antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, and tissue-regenerating properties. Traditional herbalists across Europe, Asia, and indigenous North American traditions used it as the original field dressing, chewed into a poultice and applied directly to insect stings, minor wounds, and skin infections. Modern research has confirmed that plantain extracts inhibit a broad range of bacterial strains, including Staphylococcus aureus, in laboratory settings. The young leaves are edible, mild, slightly bitter, used in salads or cooked as a pot herb. The dried leaf makes a medicinal tea used traditionally for respiratory congestion and urinary tract support. A simple poultice, fresh leaf crushed between your fingers and applied to a bee sting or minor cut, delivers immediate anti-inflammatory relief that most people who try it once never forget. Harvest young leaves in spring through early summer before the plant sends up its seed spike. Wash thoroughly. Use fresh, dried, or tinctured in a 1:5 ratio and 40% alcohol. Pro tip: do not confuse this with ornamental plantain varieties sold in garden centers. The medicinal plants are the ones growing uninvited in your lawn, the flat rosette with parallel veined leaves, and the tall, thin seed spike that you have been pulling for years. Plant 2, Dandelion, Taraxacum officinale. The most universally hated lawn weed in America is simultaneously one of the most completely useful medicinal and culinary plants available to the home herbalist, and the fact that most homeowners spend money every year trying to eliminate it is one of the more remarkable ironies in modern horticulture. Every part of the dandelion is medicinal and edible. The root contains inulin, a prebiotic fiber that feeds beneficial gut bacteria, along with bitter compounds that stimulate bile production and support liver detoxification. Traditional European herbalism used dandelion root as a primary liver tonic for centuries. The leaf is one of the most nutrient-dense edible greens available, containing more beta-carotene than carrots, more calcium than milk per gram, and significant levels of vitamins K, C, and B complex. The flower contains luteolin, a flavonoid with documented anti-inflammatory and antioxidant activity. Dandelion root tea, roasted roots simmered for 20 minutes, is a coffee substitute with genuine prebiotic benefit. Fresh young leaves in spring salads or sautéed with garlic are one of the earliest, most nutritious seasonal foods available to any North American gardener. The flowers made into dandelion wine or infused into honey create a medicinal food that traditional communities across Europe relied on through winter. Harvest roots in fall when inulin content peaks. Harvest leaves in early spring before flowering when bitterness is lowest. Harvest flowers at full open bloom on a dry morning. Pro tip: dandelions growing in lawns treated with synthetic herbicides or pesticides are not safe to harvest. Only collect from areas you know to be chemical-free for at minimum 2 full seasons. Plant 3, Chickweed, Stellaria media. Chickweed is the low-growing star-flowered mat that covers garden beds in early spring and late fall. The weed most gardeners pull by the handful before it can set seed, and it is a genuinely remarkable anti-inflammatory and nutritive plant that traditional herbalists called one of the most cooling and soothing medicines in the temperate plant kingdom. Chickweed contains saponins, coumarins, and flavonoids with documented anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial activity. Applied as a fresh poultice to inflamed skin, eczema, psoriasis patches, or insect bites, it delivers a measurable cooling, anti-itch effect that has made it a staple ingredient in traditional European skin preparations for centuries. Internally, it is one of the most nutritious wild edible greens available, high in vitamins C and B complex, iron, calcium, and phosphorus, and mild enough to eat raw in salads without any preparation beyond washing. Chickweed grows in USDA zones 3 through 10 as a cool season annual, appearing in late winter through spring and again in fall when temperatures moderate. It is most medicinally potent when harvested young, before flowering, from areas free of chemical treatment. A simple chickweed oil infusion. Fresh plant wilted for 24 hours to reduce moisture, then covered in olive oil in a jar and left in a warm spot for 4 to 6 weeks before straining. Creates a topical anti-inflammatory preparation that many natural skincare formulators pay premium prices for as a finished ingredient. Pro tip: chickweed has a single line of fine white hairs running along one side of its stem. This distinguishes it from look-alike species. Learn this identification detail before harvesting. The hairy line is the field mark. Plant 4. Red clover. Trifolium pratense. Red clover is the three-leafed flowering plant covering roadsides, unmowed meadows, and neglected lawn edges across the entire continental United States. And it is one of the most researched plants in modern phytotherapy, with particular attention to its isoflavone content and its long history as both a nutritive food and a respiratory medicine. Red clover blossoms contain isoflavones, plant-based compounds structurally similar to estrogen that have been studied for their role in supporting hormonal balance, cardiovascular health, and bone density in clinical trials. Traditional herbalists used red clover blossom tea as a primary remedy for respiratory congestion, whooping cough, and bronchitis. The expectorant and anti-inflammatory action of the blossoms on mucous membranes is well documented in the ethnobotanical literature. The blossoms are edible and sweet, used fresh in salads, dried for tea, or infused into honey. A standard red clover blossom tea uses 1 to 2 tablespoons of dried blossoms per cup of just boiled water, steeped for 15 minutes. Drink 2 to 3 cups daily during respiratory illness season. Harvest blossoms at full open bloom in a dry morning before the heat of the day drives off volatile aromatic compounds. Dry in a single layer away from direct sun at low heat until completely crisp before storing in airtight glass. Pro tip: individuals on blood-thinning medications should consult a healthcare provider before therapeutic use of red clover. The coumarin compounds in the plant have mild anticoagulant activity at medicinal doses. 4 plants in, and you have already identified 4 of the most medicinally documented weeds growing freely in American backyards right now. Plantain, dandelion, chickweed, red clover, each one with centuries of traditional use and modern research supporting what traditional medicine always knew. Hit that subscribe button right now. It is free, it is always going to be free, and this channel is here every week for the gardener who wants to understand what is actually growing in their yard. Plant 8 is the one that will genuinely stop you. Stay with me. Plant 5, Purslane. Portulaca oleracea, Purslane, is the thick-leaved, reddish-stemmed succulent that takes over vegetable beds and garden paths in summer heat. Widely considered one of the most troublesome warm-season weeds in American gardens. And it contains the highest concentration of omega-3 fatty acids of any land plant yet measured. That is not a marginal distinction. That is a nutritional profile that most people pay significant money for in supplement form, growing freely in their garden beds. Purslane's omega-3 content, primarily alpha-linolenic acid, combined with its high levels of vitamins A, C, and E, and the antioxidant betalains that give it its reddish color, make it one of the most nutritionally dense edible weeds in temperate horticulture. In Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cuisine, it is not a weed, it is a cultivated salad green sold at market for premium prices. In Mexico, it is cooked into stews. In Greece, it is dressed with olive oil and eaten fresh. In America, it gets sprayed. The flavor is mild, slightly lemony, slightly mucilaginous. Excellent raw in salads, lightly sautéed with garlic, or stirred into soups at the end of cooking. Harvest the young growing tips, the top 2 to 3 inches of each stem, for the most tender, mildest flavor. Harvest in the morning before heat drives up the oxalic acid content that makes older stems more tart. Pro tip: Purslane is high in oxalic acid. Individuals with a history of kidney stones should consume it in moderation. For everyone else, it is a nutritional windfall growing in the garden at zero cost. Plant 6, ground ivy, Glaucoma heteracea. Ground ivy is the low-creeping, scallop-leaved, purple-flowered mint family plant that spreads through shaded lawn areas and garden borders, with a persistence that makes most homeowners reach for the herbicide. And it was historically known as alehoop, used as a bittering and clarifying agent in European beer before hops became standard, and as a primary remedy for sinus congestion, ear infections, and tinnitus in traditional European herbalism. Ground ivy contains rosmarinic acid, the same anti-inflammatory compound found in rosemary and sage, along with flavonoids and volatile oils, with documented antimicrobial activity. Traditional herbalists specifically used it as a head remedy for sinus pressure, postnasal drip, and chronic ear conditions, in a way that modern herbalists continue to employ. A strong ground ivy tea used as a steam inhalation for sinus congestion is a preparation with centuries of documented use behind it. The fresh plant has a distinctive, strongly aromatic mint-adjacent scent when crushed. This is the primary field identification characteristic. Harvest young spring growth before flowering for the most potent medicinal material. Dry quickly at low heat to preserve volatile oil content. Pro tip: ground ivy spreads aggressively by runner and will colonize large areas of shaded lawn if left unchecked. If you want to manage it without eliminating it entirely, designate a shaded corner as a ground ivy harvest bed and remove it actively from areas where you want other plants to establish. Plant 7. Self-heal. Prunella vulgaris. Self-heal is the small purple-spiked flowering plant that appears in lawns, path edges, and disturbed ground across every temperate zone in North America. So named because traditional healers across multiple cultures independently identified it as a wound herb, an antimicrobial plant, and a fever remedy, long before any contact between those traditions. Modern research on Prunella vulgaris has focused on its rosmarinic acid content, one of the highest concentrations found in any common plant, along with ursolic acid and the polysaccharides that have shown antiviral activity against herpes simplex virus, HIV, and several influenza strains in laboratory research. The plant is not a pharmaceutical, but the convergence of traditional use across independent cultures and the growing body of modern research on its active compounds makes it one of the more scientifically interesting common weeds in the American lawn. A standard self-heal tea uses 1 tablespoon of dried herb per cup of water steeped for 15 minutes. Applied as a strong tea compress to minor wounds and skin infections, it delivers documented antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory activity to the tissue. Used internally, it has a long traditional association with throat infections, fever, and immune support during acute illness. Harvest the entire above-ground plant at peak flowering, when the purple flower spikes are fully open, and dry in a single layer at low heat away from direct sunlight. Pro tip: self-heal is one of the easiest medicinal plants to cultivate deliberately. If you have it growing in your lawn, allow a patch to flower and set seed each season. It will naturalize into a permanent harvest bed that requires zero maintenance. Plant 8. Stinging nettle, Urtica dioica. Here is the one. The plant that stops people completely when they understand the full picture. Because stinging nettle is simultaneously one of the most avoided, most painful to encounter plants in the American backyard, and one of the most comprehensively medicinal, most nutritionally complete, and most commercially valuable plants in the entire temperate botanical world. Stinging nettle contains a nutritional profile that rivals the most celebrated superfoods on the health market. More iron per gram than beef, significant levels of vitamins K, C, A, and the full B complex, calcium, magnesium, and a protein content that makes it one of the most nutritious edible plants available to any climate. The anti-inflammatory compounds in nettle leaf, including quercetin, camphorol, and caffeic acid derivatives, have been studied in clinical trials for arthritis, allergic rhinitis, benign prostatic hyperplasia, and blood sugar regulation, with results that have positioned nettle root and leaf extracts as legitimate subjects of serious phytopharmacological research. The antimicrobial activity of nettle against a range of bacterial and fungal pathogens is documented. Traditional European herbalism used it as a primary spring tonic, consumed as a cooked green or tea at the beginning of each season, specifically to support immune function after winter. The formic acid and histamine compounds responsible for the sting are completely neutralized by cooking, blanching, or drying. A 30-second blanch in boiling water produces a mild, deeply nourishing green that tastes like a richer, more mineral-dense spinach. Dried nettle leaf sells commercially for between $8 and $20 per pound through herbal suppliers. Fresh nettle at farmers markets in areas where foragers supply them commands $4 to $8 per bunch. A productive nettle patch in a backyard corner generates hundreds of dollars worth of harvestable material annually from a plant that asks nothing in return except to be left alone to grow. Harvest with thick gloves, cutting the top 4 to 6 inches of young spring growth when the plant is under 12 inches tall. This is the most tender and medicinally potent material. Blanch immediately upon harvest or dry at low heat. Never handle fresh nettle with bare hands or allow it to contact skin. Drop a yes in the comments if stinging nettle is growing in your yard right now and you have been trying to get rid of it, because that changes today. 8 plants in. Plantain healing wounds at the cellular level. Dandelion feeding your liver and your gut microbiome. Chickweed cooling inflamed skin. Red clover supporting respiratory health. Purslane delivering more omega-3 than most supplements. Ground ivy clearing sinus pressure with centuries of documentation. Self-heal with antiviral research that is actively ongoing. And stinging nettle, the most avoided plant in the yard, and the most comprehensively valuable one on this entire list. If you are ready to look at your backyard completely differently, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel is here every week for the gardener who wants to understand what is actually growing around them. Plant 9 is the closer, and it is the one that most gardeners walk past every single day without any idea what it is capable of. Plant 9, elderberry volunteer shoots, Sambucus nigra, Sambucus canadensis. Elderberry grows wild across most of the eastern and central United States, sprouting as volunteer seedlings along fence lines, at woodland edges, in neglected corners of suburban properties, and most homeowners remove it during routine yard cleanup without any awareness that they are pulling out one of the most commercially and medicinally significant plants in American horticulture. American black elderberry, Sambucus canadensis, produces the same medicinal berry as the European Sambucus nigra, whose extract forms the basis of the billion-dollar elderberry supplement industry. The anthocyanins, flavonoids, and polysaccharides in elderberry fruit have been studied in clinical trials showing reduced duration and severity of influenza, documented antiviral activity against multiple respiratory virus strains, and significant antioxidant and immune-modulating effects. These are not marginal findings in fringe journals. They are the basis of a commercial supplement market that crossed $1 billion in annual U.S. sales and continues to expand. Elderberry growing voluntarily on your property is a commercial asset producing itself at zero cost from free seed delivery. A single mature elderberry shrub yields 12 to 15 pounds of fresh berries per season. Dried elderberries sell wholesale for $8 to $20 per pound. Fresh elderberry juice commands $30 to $60 per pound through direct and specialty channels. Identify the volunteer correctly before harvesting. Elderberry has pinnately compound leaves with 5 to 11 leaflets, hollow pithy stems, and flat-topped flower clusters called cymes that produce the characteristic dark purple-black berry clusters in late summer. Never consume raw elderberries, raw elderflowers, or any other part of the raw plant. The glycosides in raw material cause nausea and vomiting. Cook or dry all berry material before consumption. All other parts of the plant, leaves, bark, roots, unripe berries, are toxic and should never be consumed. Pro tip: if you have elderberry volunteers growing on your property, transplant one to a permanent location in fall before it gets accidentally removed. Give it full sun, average soil, and one companion plant of a different variety within 50 feet for cross-pollination. Within 3 seasons, you have a permanent, self-sustaining medicinal food shrub producing harvestable material every August. Which of these 9 plants are you finding in your yard right now? Drop it in the comments. And if you have been actively removing any of them, tell me which one. The comments section on this video is going to be interesting. If you have spent any part of the last few seasons pulling, spraying, or cursing the plants on this list, I want you to sit with something for a moment. The most medicinally documented plants in your zip code did not come from a supplement company. They did not arrive in a labeled bottle with a health claim approved by a marketing team. They came up through your soil on their own, the way they have been coming up through human soil for thousands of years, long before there was an industry to sell them back to you in capsule form. Plantain on your driveway crack, dandelion in your lawn, chickweed in your garden bed, purslane in your vegetable plot, stinging nettle in your fence corner, elderberry at your property edge. These plants are not accidents. They are not invaders. They are a medicine cabinet that grows itself, costs nothing, and has been documented across more cultures and more centuries than any pharmaceutical product currently on a shelf. You do not have to use all of them. You do not have to use any of them without further research and the guidance of a qualified herbalist or healthcare provider. But you should know what they are before you spray them. This channel is free. It is here every single week. It is built for the gardener who wants to understand what is actually growing in their yard and what they might be destroying by mistake. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell, drop your zone, and which of these 9 plants is growing in your yard right now. And maybe, just maybe, put down the herbicide sprayer this weekend and look a little more carefully at what came up. I'll see you in the next one.